Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am very happy to have you all here. Hopefully, as I say each time, because I have so many technical difficulties. Half the time, my microphone or my headphones or something isn't working. So I'm traveling this week, and so I have a different setup and only one screen. I had a couple of things that I want to get us through today, and we'll see if I can be creative without having a second screen. I was going to go through some leadership tips, and I had a couple of slides I wanted to get through, but that's not going to be possible. But anyway, let's start with good morning. Hello. Who's out there? How are you? As you may know, I am the kind of person I like to engage and sorry, my asthma has been acting up. I like to engage. And so, even in this type of situation, I love to know that there are individuals on the other side and that I'm not just here rambling and talking to myself, but that anything that I say is resonating or is not resonating, or you want to dive deeper into that. So, very interested in hearing from you. Who are you? Where are you? My name is Leigh Felton, and this is So You're Thinking About Being a Chief of Staff. This is where we talk about all things Chief of Staff, whether you are currently in the Chief of Staff role, whether you're potentially looking at jobs similar to the Chief of Staff position, whether you want to hire the role, partner with the role, or this is just something that you've seen pop up lately and it seems like an interesting function that you want to know more about. We talk about all of those things. And if you haven't had a chance to catch up on some of our previous podcasts, please go back on my LinkedIn page. You can see all of my previous podcasts for So You're Thinking About Being a Chief of Staff. Also on my YouTube channel, you can subscribe to that. And I also have all of the videos and recordings there. So we are so happy to have you today. And as I said, today we are talking about leadership. And although I don't and can't, I have one screen, and I typically have four screens. So I only have one screen. So although I can't do the the presentation and show you the couple of slides that I had, and we'll probably do that next time. So I hold these sessions every 2 weeks. So I'll probably show you those next time. But we still want to talk about leadership because in the chief of staff realm, leadership means a lot of things. And I'm not just talking about the executive that the chief of staff supports. I'm not just talking about the leadership team that the chief of staff works with, peers with, supports. I'm also talking about leadership from the perspective of the chief of staff themselves. And so that term leadership can be extremely loaded, but it carries a lot of meaning if you understand how to approach your chief of staff function as a leader, as a peer, as a navigator. So let's see who we have out there today. So we got LinkedIn user. I got this. I got this. You are absolutely right. I got this without a shadow of a doubt. Thank you for that. Abby, nice to see you. And hello, Talisha from Savannah, Georgia, Southern Oregon. Nice to see you as well. So nice to have everybody today. And as we start, typically I ask a question, and it is usually from a poll or survey that I have run. But this time, it was just based on a one slide or one image that I put out there that basically said, if you're thinking about high functioning versus low functioning leadership teams, what makes the difference? What do you think makes the difference between a high functioning, high impact leadership team? So we're not just talking about the business. We're talking about a leadership team that orchestrates and helps support and run and organize and prioritize the center of the business's success. So if you think about the leadership team itself, so you can have successful businesses that have highly low functioning, dysfunctional leadership teams, right? It makes the experience very, very dreadful. And as we've heard the term toxic environment, it makes it a very dreadful experience for those participating. And most of the time, that's when you have a lot of high turnover at the leadership levels. But you also can have a high functioning leadership team that can make the business even more successful, and also that can help turn a business around. So as you think about the difference between a high functioning and a low functioning leadership team, or as some people say, dysfunctional leadership team, high functioning, high impact versus dysfunctional, what do you think makes the biggest difference? And so we have Talisha who says clarity. And I'm guessing if I were to dive into that a little bit, you would say clarity of roles, clarity of priorities, clarity of goals. So there's a lot also of weight behind the word clarity. And so Talisha says clarity. I have a LinkedIn user who says communications. Um, so communication. So as we think about communications, team agreements, a clear arc, and so racy, however, whatever your structure is that you use for saying what are the roles and responsibilities, accountabilities, who's on task for what. So let's group all of that, just like LinkedIn user said, let's group all of that in communications. And so communications in driving that those roles and responsibilities. And as Talisha said, which probably leads back to clarity. Hi, Sheila. Nice to see you from Dallas. Nice to see Sheila in the house. And I do want to mention, if there's anybody here on the LinkedIn Live, that is from Chief. If somebody could pop into the Zoom, the Chief Zoom session, and make sure that those individuals know that we run it through. I put the link in, but for just in case we still have people hanging out over there, I don't want them to think that I abandoned them and that I am not actually doing the session. So if somebody could pop over to Chief and send them the link to join us here, that would be sincerely appreciated. Okay, so Cynthia says transparency, communication, support. Absolutely. Are there any other? So let's think outside of the box. Are there any other things that you can think about, the leadership teams that you have been part of or even observed? What are the things that struck you as, my gosh, I trust them, they got this, I feel like I am part of something. I am a part of something bigger. I'm a part of something that is going in the direction that has been communicated. Or what have you observed that said, oh gosh, oh gosh, hold on, this is going to be rocky. This may not go as we had hoped, and we just got to, I got to do my thing, and at least take care of me. And but you don't necessarily believe that it's the leadership team that is opening those doorways. So let's think outside of the box. Think about the leadership teams that you've either been part of, or the leadership teams that you've observed, and what are the things that you've noticed that either make them high functioning, high impact, and that garners that belief in them driving the business, versus you kind of questioning, how are we going to get there? Let me, and a lot of times it comes to, let me just focus on mine because the rest of this is a mess. So what are those things? Let's take a look. Thank you, Sheila, for going into Chief for me. So we have trust, and we have leadership involvement with their team. Leadership involvement with their team. And so you have the leader, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You have the leader at the leadership table, and then you have the leader for their specific line of business. And so, Joyce, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that not just the leader at the table, but how they're involved with their actual line of business. Okay. Authenticity Emotional intelligence. I always it's interesting to me when I hear the word or I see the word emotional intelligence come up because people don't they should because I talk about it all the time. People don't know this about me, but I'm neurodiverse. And so I believe that I have emotional intelligence. I can't always like read people, and people can't always read me, like facial expressions and gestures. You'll notice on every single video, I can't help it. I rock. It's natural for me. It's who I am. I move a lot and I embrace that about myself. It helps me think. But I always find it interesting when people say emotional intelligence to dig into that. We maybe we'll have a separate session on it. But I definitely think having the understanding that this is not about your individual success or your individual goals, and being able to take into consideration, like you said, your line of business, the leadership team, and the business overall. Okay, so alignment. Let me see. A lot of alignment. People are saying alignment out there. Even if you don't have alignment behind the doors, that you have alignment publicly. Um, Interest in actually seeing the team, the business, the company grow, interested in seeing growth, aligning towards that mission, vision, values, concise communications and plans, that you have a roadmap. And again, we're going back to that mission, vision, values. This is huge. Great point. Okay, so let's dive into it. I can I just say yes, yes, and so all of those things. When I think about high functioning leadership teams, and I've worked with a lot of leadership teams over the years, and one of the roles of the chief of staff isn't to come in and say, gosh, this leadership team just is not making it happen, is not getting along, is not, driving the business. The role of an executive chief of staff is to help ensure that your leadership team is high functioning. Now, I didn't say your job and your responsibility is to ensure, because these are adults. These are people with different personalities, different objectives. And so you cannot control everyone, and you shouldn't even try to control everyone. But what you put in place and how you orchestrate and navigate that business and how you run that executive office makes a significant difference in what's tolerated at the leadership team level, and what you all need to pause and say, okay, let's address this. Let's talk about how we're behaving, that you actually can call that out. So it's very important that as a chief of staff, you understand you have a significant responsibility when it comes to the high impact, the low impact, the functioning, the actual functioning of the leadership team. So let's talk about a few different areas as we talk about navigating leadership team dynamics. So all of those things that make a difference. And if you can think about them like on a spectrum, it's not one thing. I mean, there was a lot of commonalities of things that people posted during the first survey. There's a lot of things around trust, around communication, around I think someone had said accountability. There's a lot of there's a lot of things when it comes to roles and clarity. All of those things make a difference, but there's some thought processes as well that make a significant difference as you approach how you are going to really be a part of a leadership team, and as you hold your leaders, your leaders, your peers on that team accountable for also being high productive, high performing. So let's first talk about, someone had mentioned the line of business and making sure that the leader's taking care of their line of business. That is true. The leader has a line of business, whether you're marketing, CMO, whether you're finance, CFO, whether you're product, CPO, um, each leader has a line of business that you are responsible for, that you need to drive to success. When you come to the leadership team table, you solely are representing that business and the needs of that business, the priorities of that business. So that is one hat that you wear as a leader at the leadership team. But it's not the only hat. And actually, if you were to ask me, it is not the most important hat. You have your expertise. Your CMO, you have been doing marketing for, a million years. You know how to run that business and you know what that business needs. When you come to that leadership team, you're representing marketing, but you're also representing the business and what's best for the business first and foremost, even before you are taking care of marketing. So even if it means because you know it's best for the business to go in a certain direction, and it may mean that it may not be the best specifically for your team, if you're a leader, you have to do and think about the collective business and the collective voices that are sitting at that table. So that's when I talk about the leader versus the manager. I see the manager as the person managing that line of business. The leader is the person that thinks about the overall business, regardless of specifically their needs. So you have to sometimes step outside of your own individual needs to take care of the business. The other thing is personality. So as much as you might have trust, clarity, role clarity, accountability, even resources, you have or will have, if you haven't already worked with different leadership teams, and this is something that you have to look forward to in your career, you will find out that the personalities on leadership teams are very, very dynamic. And excuse me, you get all kinds of people. And these individuals, they've gotten to where they've gotten for a reason. And, they're very smart. They're very, and many times they can be very dominating. They can be very, and believe it or not, you can also have very passive leaders. And so there are times where personality, so no matter how much trust and accountability and clarity and all of those things that you build up, personalities of the team and the personality clashes of the individuals on the team might need to be addressed, because that can make a significant difference in you actually even being able to move the business forward. And so there's many different team evaluations that help, specifically when it comes to personality types and preferences. And I would always encourage a team to go through some of those assessments and evaluations openly, very transparently together, to understand the the personality. And this not trying to put anybody in a box, but it's saying, okay, this is kind of, gives me some an outline of how Tammy works and how her preferences are. Like for instance, I'm a kind of person, I can sometimes forget some of the niceties. Like, oh, how's your day? How are your kids? And how's everything? I can forget that, whether it's in conversation, whether it's an email. I a lot of times have to force myself to go back and say, oh, the niceties, make sure to put those in there too. And you know and I'm a very, okay, what's on the plate, what do we have to get done, where does it need to go, blah 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 blah. And so a lot of times these personality tests will show you, okay, for Leigh, she's just very direct, and if she just comes to you and say blah 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 blah, it's not that she's being rude, it's not that she's just being, whatever word you can think of, some of the words that I've been called, right? It's not any of those things. It's just that she is a person that focuses, because of the list of things I have to do. I focus to get things done. So, personalities, even some people say, oh, I've worked with such narcissists. Believe it or not, a lot of leaders, to get some of the things that we have done, narcissism, although a pain in the butt to deal with, is sometimes necessary because of the different approaches. So don't think about personalities as good personalities or bad personalities. They're different. And so you have to understand them. You have to have the team understand them, and you have to learn how to work together. And then, as somebody said, it's around clarity. And I'm going to put that specifically on role clarity. And so, if you have your LT together, what are the functions and the roles of the individuals at the LT? Having that clarity is extremely important. If everybody, for instance, take a chief of staff, if everybody feels like, hey, I can take over this meeting because I have something priority, I have this that I need to talk about, versus, let's say, it's the chief of staff who owns that leadership team meeting, then it's very important to be very clear. We have a parking lot or however you run your meetings, but that you are facilitating and managing that meeting. So knowing the role that people play in these LT meetings is very is very important. The other thing is the leveling, the seniority of the members on the team. And when you think about your leadership team, the reason this is so important is because if you have some leadership teams I've seen, oh gosh, we have 40 people on our leadership team. That's not a leadership team. That is your extended leaders. Okay. That is not a leadership team. So your leadership team are the set of people that says, if you think about your board of directors who are accountable to that board, who present and represent the business to that board. And if you have many layers on the leadership team, so you have people that report to people all sit on the leadership team together, that can be very difficult because it can change the dynamic, it can change the conversation, and it doesn't, it doesn't, you're not looking around the table seeing your peers that you can also be vulnerable with. And I say vulnerability not in the sense that we all have to sit around and hold arms and cry, but being vulnerable and saying, you know what, pause. I didn't appreciate that because blah, blah, blah. Wait, pause. That you can actually have real conversations and be peers and see each other as such. And so you have so many different levels where you're not having your peers at the leadership team table, then the conversation is not going to be focused and centered on the real things that need to happen. Um, the other thing is, like I said, dominating voices. And this is where a chief of staff and the executive play a key role. You're going to have your type A personalities with dominating voices. They're dominating, they're domineering. They think whatever they have to say is the most important thing. And a lot of times, especially depending on how you make decisions as a leader, as a team, a lot of times these domineering voices, they're the ones that are influencing and they always want to get it their way. So they're talking over people and they're saying, hey, you're right, right. And so you need to be able to manage that, especially if you also have passive voices on the teams. The other thing, and I want to get to some Q&A, but the other thing is the friends versus peers. And so this is significantly important because one of the things that you want to keep in mind when it comes to leadership teams is you do not have to be friends. Do you need to get along? Do you need to be able to communicate? Do you need to be able to trust one another and be vulnerable? That would be awesome. As I think about the high functioning leadership teams that I've worked with, they actually do trust one another when they travel together. They actually enjoy being with one another. But where you run into the problem is when you have leadership teams that feel they have to be friends. They have to get along. They don't want anybody coming into the team that's going to be a disruptor, that doesn't have a personality that fits with everybody else. So if it's like, okay, this is how we function as a team, and any leader that we bring in needs to kind of be like the rest of us. Red flag, red flag. And that being friends, having that friendship leadership team actually is detrimental to the business, because I'm sure many of you have heard of the term groupthink. You get to the point where you want to go along, you want to get along, and it's so harmonic that everyone is just agreeing. And a lot of times you're not agreeing because it's what's best for the business. You're agreeing because it's what's best for your relationship with the other members of the team. And it's incredibly unhealthy. And you might be looking, it's like being friends and friendly with your leaders, that's unhealthy. I'm not saying being friendly or friends with your peers on your leadership team is unhealthy. I'm saying requiring that leadership team dynamic to be one of friendship, one of similar personalities or approaches, that is dangerous, extremely dangerous. Okay, so with all of that being said, there are many, like I said, there are many things that have to be taken into consideration. The other things are such like frequency of interaction. I had one group that said, "Oh, our leadership team, we meet quarterly." If your leadership team that meets quarterly, then I would say that the quarterly team is not the leadership team. Whatever the businesses are that are meeting more frequently, making the decisions, changing direction and pivoting, that's your leadership team. If you're only meeting quarterly, you are more like a board and an influencer than actually leading the business. So the frequency of your interactions, and not saying, okay, not every leadership team meets weekly. I typically, in the teams that I work with, find it extremely important to have one day, whatever time frame. Let's say you meet for an hour. Let's say you meet for 2 hours. Let's say you meet for 3 hours, depending on what kind of business you're running. That there's one day, 1 2 hours per week, same day, very consistent. That every leader on our team knows that this time is sacred. There's no customer meetings. There's no this or that, unless I'm on holiday or traveling for events or whatever. Even if I'm traveling for events, I would join in virtually. That there is a sacred time committed by every member of the leadership team to be at that meeting, whatever that frequency is. One time a week, once every other week. The least I would say, if you're meeting monthly, okay. I would encourage you to consider, okay, then what are you talking about? What are you missing? How are you running other parts of the business? But every member of the team should be there, should be required to be there, unless there's some major circumstance. And a customer meeting, because you can schedule that, a customer meeting is not an excuse to not be at your leadership team meeting. There's very few excuses to not say this 1 hour, these 2 hours per week is where we need to get the business done. And to the chiefs of staff, that time where you have, use it wisely. It's not just for FYI. It's not just for let's have a casual chat and conversation. This is where we come together, where we move the business, where we make decisions. So think critically about the agendas, the content, the rhythm of what needs to be discussed at what point in the year. Make those leadership teams so effective that your leaders don't want to miss them, that they're so valuable, and that the discussions are so impactful that people know I need to be there, because this is where we actually make decisions, we make pivots, and we can move the business. And then from when we leave that meeting, we all have just like somebody had said earlier, we all have agreement, and then we go and run our line of business. And so it's critically important to me. So if you have leadership team meetings where people half the time, 2 3 of the leaders, whatever, don't even show up, look at your content. Look at your content. because most of the time, if leaders don't see it as a valuable use of time, instead of speaking up and saying something, they'll just have other priorities because they can get the notes of what was covered later if there was anything important at all. Okay, so we are out of time. I hope something that we covered here today. There wasn't a lot of things going in the chat, so I'm guessing everybody has their questions answered. So there, you didn't have questions today. If you do have questions, feel free to put them in the chat, because I do, either later today, over the weekend, or Monday, I will go through the chat and answer any additional questions. This right here, these every other week sessions, this is the time to ask questions. A lot of people ask me, offline, and I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn. But a lot of people ask me offline, hey, can we meet? There's something valuable that you said. Can we meet and I can get more information? I actually am a consultant and a chief of staff coach. So I try to use this time because I do believe in mentoring. I do believe in supporting our communities, especially in getting clarity on the chief of staff role. And so I try to use these sessions for my peer mentoring, as my peer mentoring sessions. And so if anybody's interested in coaching or consulting, and I can help you with that aspect of your business, please contact me and we can set up time to discuss that. But this is your opportunity if you want that mentoring. If you have questions and things that you're going through, even if you don't want to share it publicly in the chat, then send me the question in IM on LinkedIn, and I'll try to get to it there. But the easiest way to do it is just to share it in the chat during these sessions, because I go through that and I'll get to those more quickly than I will the one off. So with that, I want to thank all of you for joining me here today. I hope something that I said resonated, or got you thinking slightly different, or even validated something that you were already thinking about. And I hope that you found it helpful. And I wish you the best of luck. I will see you in 2 weeks. Until then, take care.